People go hardcore keto and they don't take adequate time off of it. And you lose a lot of the mitochondrial machinery to process glucose. And there's a lot of studies that show you become glucose intolerant. Now, does that mean that you become instantly diabetic? No, not at all. It means that you aren't going to oxidize glucose as efficiently. So when you do have it, you'll have a lot of metabolic waste, you'll have metabolic gridlock, and you'll feel like crap. And that explains why so many people that do keto, when they have their cheat meal, they feel like garbage. Carbs aren't bad. Like we've eaten them our entire history. It's just we have this overconsumption of highly processed, refined carbs that have made it to the point where like the overconsumption has really messed us up. Fat adaptation is just where your body understands how to use free fatty acids as a fuel source. So again, it kind of comes right back to like someone that's doing a lot of cardio, someone that is an endurance athlete, they can be fat adapted, but not necessarily keto adapted. Mm-hmm. Keto is how long you're actually exposing yourself to beta hydroxybutyrate.
Here we go. We have an amazing interview up ahead with somebody you already know, Thomas DeLauer. Thomas DeLauer is a world leader in the space of health and nutrition and fitness, not just keto. The man knows his stuff. He knows how the body works at the cellular level. Without further ado, here's Thomas DeLauer. Hey, brother.
What is going on, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you. Welcome back to the podcast, man. Thank you for coming back.
Yeah, man, it's a blast.
First question is this. You gave a great analogy at the Biohacking Congress on this train, and you kind of compared this train to our metabolism, this metabolic system. And we align in the sense that we love keto, but we don't think you should be keto all the time. So Can you share why you believe that and use that analogy?
Yeah, I mean, so the analogy that I brought up was if you have a train going down a typical track and you reach the Y or the fork in the track that trains would reach, ordinarily there's that little lever that someone will get off the train and pull, and that'll allow the train to go either the left track or the right track. And there's a manual lever. But visualize for a minute that the train is only going down that left avenue all the time. And that means that the lever never gets pulled to switch the track over to the right. Okay. That lever would probably be pretty rusted. It'd be pretty hard to move. It would be pretty hard. You'd have to force it in order to get it to switch over to the right track. But let's pretend for a second that you're consistently switching between the left track and the right track. So that lever gets moved all the time. The lever is much less likely to be rusted up and stuck. So it's going to be, a lot more pliable. Well, the same thing kind of applies within your body with metabolic flexibility. Like, let's just pretend hypothetically that ketogenic diet and fat adaptation and that whole process, beta oxidation is the left track and glucose oxidation, glycolysis is the right track. Neither track is good nor bad, really. I mean, they're just tracks. But if you go down one track for too long without ever switching the mitochondrial machinery to go to the other track, then you're going to get dependent on that one track and you're going to become somewhat intolerant. So the reason that I mentioned that with keto is people go hardcore keto and they don't take adequate time off of it. And you lose a lot of the mitochondrial machinery to process glucose. And there's a lot of studies that show you become glucose intolerant. Now, does that mean that you become instantly diabetic? No, not at all. It means that you aren't going to oxidize glucose as efficiently. So when you do have it, you'll have a lot of metabolic waste, you'll have metabolic gridlock, and you'll feel like crap. And that explains why so many people that do keto, when they have their cheat meal, they feel like garbage. And granted, there's a lot of things. I mean, when they have a cheat meal, they're probably having cruddy food. But there's a lot of people that will do keto really strict, and they'll be like, no, if I even have a sweet potato, I feel like garbage. Well, you shouldn't, because carbs aren't bad. Like we've eaten them our entire history. It's just we have this overconsumption of highly processed, refined carbs that have made it to the point where like the overconsumption has really messed us up. You should be able to eat a sweet potato and not feel like complete trash. You might feel better on keto, but you shouldn't feel like you need to go sleep for 6 hours if you had a sweet potato. Your body should be able to incinerate that, like it or not. Like your body should have the mitochondrial ability to like process that. And that's where being dual fueled and being able to really process both fuels comes in handy. So hence the whole analogy of, switching the gears now and then. So your train will occasionally go down the right track just to make sure it doesn't get rusty.
So how long do you recommend somebody do keto for before they start switching that track?
It's highly individual. It really is, depending on like how much you exercise, how much cardio you do, because you can get yourself fat adapted really quickly if you're doing a lot of cardio. Like in endurance athletes, I mean, they are largely fat adapted, even not being in keto. Like if you took, some carb burner that eats 800 carbs a day, but is running a marathon every day, despite the fact that he's eating carbs, he's probably very fat adapted, because no matter which way you spin it, if you're doing lower intensity, longer duration cardio, you're going through beta oxidation in a similar way as if you were, oxidizing fat via a ketogenic diet. So it's highly dependent. So I usually say, like 60 days minimum, like on a keto diet, just so you have time to get fat adapted. You really have time to like develop that mitochondrial machinery, especially the first time. Like if you're first going into keto, you got to give it 60 days minimum. Like you really, like, I would even say like the first time you're going keto, go 6 months, like really get yourself adapted before you start bouncing in and out of it. And then after that, like for me, it's usually like 60 days on, like 3 weeks off is usually kind of my norm. I'll usually go 60 to 90 days on, and 3 to 4 weeks off, depending on how long I was on before. That's like my pattern. Do I feel worse on carbs? Mentally, yes. I mean, I'm not going to lie, but I don't feel like I'm, can't function. I mean, I don't think anyone else would ever notice it. A video of mine that's filmed when I'm on carbs versus when I'm on ketones. I think to the naked eye, I come across just as fine, but it's, I feel it. I don't feel as articulate. But I mean, that's just the way it is. But performance wise, I get a nice little boost in terms of my strength in the gym, and that's something to count. So that's generally what I would recommend is 60 days on, 30 days off.
Yeah, I like that recommendation. It's very much aligned with the book Keto Flex, because it takes about 60 days or so to get through my first 3 pillars before we start practicing the flexing, which we intentionally get out of ketosis. Now, you explained fat adaptation, which is different than keto adaptation. A lot of people don't understand that. So could you explain the difference between the two?
Yeah. So fat adaptation is just where your body knows how to oxidize fats. Okay. So you have, 3 different things: lipolysis, oxidation, and ketogenesis. Very different things. Lipolysis is the mobilization of fats, liberating fats from the adipose tissue. Okay. Beta oxidation, or fat adaptation, or fat burning, or whatever, is going to be, where the cells are taking up free fatty acids, converting them into acetyl coenzyme A, and ultimately creating energy that way. Ketogenesis, or keto adaptation, is where some of those fatty acids are going to the liver, and the liver is converting them into ketones. So kind of an indirect process. Still acetyl coenzyme A conversion, still kind of that whole thing, but then, eventually turning into ketones. Keto adaptation is where your body becomes adapted to utilizing ketones at the given ketone receptor sites. Fat adaptation is just where your body understands how to use free fatty acids as a fuel source. So again, it kind of comes right back to like someone that's doing a lot of cardio, someone that is an endurance athlete, they can be fat adapted, but not necessarily keto adapted. Mm-hmm. Keto is how long you're actually exposing yourself to beta hydroxybutyrate.
So the goal is really to get keto adapted, because to your point, you could just do a lot of exercise and become fat adapted for that moment or so, or you could just fast and become fat adapted, but that's not necessarily, you're not teaching your body to utilize the ketones. So fat adaptation could be days to weeks. Keto adaptation, 8 to 12 weeks. Is that what you've seen?
Exactly. Yep.
So you mentioned when you do keto, you notice that your brain performance is much better. Me too. It's one of the reasons why I do keto. And then when you're not doing keto, you feel good, but you just don't feel as mentally clear, as mentally sharp. You're somebody who actually mentioned something in a recent video about some studies that have come out on what keto could do for brain performance. And you talked about the Gibbs free energy equation.
Yep.
And you know what, Thomas, not a lot of people talk about that. So I was impressed. I was like, oh, look at Thomas breaking down the Gibbs free. So explain what that is and how that could relate to keto.
Yeah, I'll explain it the best way that my feeble mind can. But Gibbs free energy, the best way to just kind of explain it is like when you produce energy within the brain, or like simple brain energetics, like you always have like an abundance of sort of free energy that is used for other things. Like kind of comes back even to like Newtonian physics. Like it's almost like, best way to explain it is almost like a spillover. You have this extra energy, but it's not oxidative stress. It's not energy that's like reactive and going to cause problems. That's extra energy that has to get kind of channeled somewhere else. So when you're talking about like brain energetics, That's how you can have more what's called network stability. You have more like neural firing between different regions of the brain when you have more quote unquote free energy. And because ketones burn so much cleaner, you're left with more energy. You have less energy that is getting oxidized and less energy that is ultimately resulting in oxidative damage, and more energy that is available, i.e. free energy. That's a very like elementary breakdown of it. It's good. Gibbs free energy is a pretty complicated thing to, if you don't understand brain energetics and don't kind of understand, again, what's called network stability, which is sort of the communication between the different regions of the brain. You sound like you're a crazy person trying to explain it. I guess I am kind of a crazy person, but
I guess we both are, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great explanation. And you also mentioned that ketones produce about 27% more energy via this Gibbs energy equation versus glucose. So that's fascinating, because I experienced that just by doing keto, and I know that you do as well. I'm curious, Thomas, out of the many years you've been doing keto, I think for what, 10 or 11 years?
Yeah, it's about almost 11 now.
Almost 11 years. You've done a lot of research, a lot of experimentation, experience. Out of all of those years of research and experience, what is like the most surprising thing you've learned about the human body, this incredible innate intelligence within us?
That's a good question. I think the biggest overarching thing that I've learned is that everything is a feedback. Like everything is a loop. Everything is a feedback loop. And I used to understand feedback loop in the world of endocrinology and like testosterone relationships there. And that made sense. I understood like, oh, okay, if shut down this endogenous testosterone production, then it creates this feedback loop. That all made sense from a hormonal standpoint, but didn't really realize how much it happens in virtually everything. Like everything has a receptor, everything has a signal, everything communicates with each other. And the benefits in which we achieve from doing nutritional intervention or different exercise modalities is all about trying to send a different signal and trying to kind of have this different reaction. What I mean by that is 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that the gut microbiome and short chain fatty acids, like what we break down fibers into, have the ability to send signals that regulate glucose metabolism. But then when you start realizing it and you start thinking about it, it makes perfect sense that you're going to have this constant feedback mechanism. And same thing with ketones. Like ketones are a signaling device. They hit cells, and there we have receptors on our cells to specifically accept ketones so that the body understands we are quote unquote in a time of starvation, and has different chain reactions that occur, resulting in different longevity benefits and whatnot. So the simplest way is just, opening my eyes to all this. I never would have realized that. And that's probably the biggest overarching thing, is that every single thing we do has a chain reaction and sends a different signal to do something else. And it's not just as cut and dry as everyone wants to make it seem.
Yeah, so true. What you're kind of explaining the process of hormesis, right? When you change and vary. So maybe go a little bit deeper into that, and why this hormetic curve is so important to achieve, but we also, too much of it could be a bad thing.
Yeah. And this is something that, Dr. Pompa talks a lot about too, but I mean, hormetic stressors, hormesis in general, I think it's virtually everything really, like
so true.
It is everything is an adaptation, as just everything is a signal, right? So the hormetic stressors in our life, they happen on a daily basis, whether we realize them or not. I mean, let's just use like a really simple example. I mean, you get hungry. Okay. So you have a little bit of a hormetic, it's not fun to be hungry, but it's a little bit of a hormetic stressor that forces an adaptation that allows your body to adjust and get more acclimated. And its adaptation is, okay, well, if you're not going to feed me, then screw you. I'm going to find food from your body fat. I'm going to find food from your muscle tissue. I'm going to find, it's going to, body's like kind of giving you the finger in a way, but it's an adaptation. The same thing kind of applies when we get thirsty, right? We don't drink water. So, okay, well, then we have, vasopressin. We have all these other things that are going to cause us to retain water. But if we start pushing these stressors too far, then yes, it's a nice curve until it's a pretty aggressive drop. Like the hormetic curve is, you can add stress, you can add stress, you can add stress, and it keeps going up, 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 and starts to flatline a little bit. And all of that means that you can adapt to that stress. But then when you push it just a tad too far, the benefits go away. Another example would be, let's say you exercise, and you have progressively more intense workouts and you get progressively stronger as an adaptation. But there's a limit. Eventually, if you push yourself too hard, you're going to get yourself sick, right? You're going to overtrain. Same thing applies in virtually like everything we expose ourselves to. Even when we try different foods, it's a stressor to our body. That's why we don't always feel good. That's another reason why when you're doing keto and all of a sudden you have a sweet potato, you don't feel like it should be there. But you also have this radical shift in your body that's adapting and this constant adaptation. And one of the things that you say that Dr. Pompa says all the time that I just agree with so much is like, we should always be in a little bit of discomfort. And I don't mean painful discomfort, but I mean mentally should always be pushing the boundaries and should always be testing different things, because that level of discomfort is going to allow us to acclimate and adapt. Then you might be, begs the question like, okay, well, when is the end? When do I finally get to enjoy the fruits of my labor? When you die? I mean, because like, so you have a choice. Like you either adapt and you like stress yourself little bits here and there and make life a little bit uncomfortable, but you get to live, or you throw in the towel and you become, a 90-year-old sedentary person that just wants to give up on life and no longer wants the stress anymore. So you sit in a bed and wither away. Like, I'm not saying you're going to live forever at all. And I'm not trying to insinuate that people that are frail are bad people. My point is just saying that you should always be keeping a stimulus and keeping a little bit of stress. It's just like your dogs, they get old and they get to be 15, 16 years old sometimes, and you don't take them for walks anymore. But that's when they start to deteriorate because there's no more stressor, no more adaptation. So what's the point in living? The cells don't see a point anymore. There's no adaptation that needs to occur. I hope I don't sound like too cynical and dark. I'm just
no,
like it's. I think it's something that we all could learn a lot from, because we should be a little bit uncomfortable, and that goes for everything that we do.
Yeah, amen. Everything that we do, the magic is outside of that comfort zone, but you don't want to do too much of it, right? It's the example: too much exercise, not good; too much fasting, not good. It's a hormetic, it's a positive stress, but too much of a good thing ends up being a bad thing. You don't want excessive autophagy. You don't want excessive mTOR. You want that proper balance. But the difficult part that we're tasked with, as every single person is in this world, 7.5 billion people, is finding your hormetic curve. Like, what is proper for you? Maybe you got to do keto for 6 months versus the 60 days. Maybe you got to do fasting 18 hours versus the 14 hours. So how do you find that proper balance for yourself?
That's a good question. I just filmed some content on this that hasn't gone live on my channel yet, but
perfect.
There's some data points with it. Heart rate variability is a great way that you can kind of look at these things. I'm not the biggest believer in like totally relying on heart rate variability, because there's a lot of just different factors with it. But heart rate variability is measuring basically the time, the difference in the time between beats. So, a higher heart rate variability indicates that you have a lot of flexibility within your strokes with your heart, so how much you can adapt. So the reason that I mentioned that and finding your hormetic curve is, at least with fasting, if I were to start fasting today, and I've never fasted before, I might find that my heart rate variability drops significantly, because fasting is a huge stressor to me. But if I, after today, fast religiously 2 to 3 days a week for a year, flash forward a year, that same fast that I did today would have a completely different result on my heart rate variability. There's not a lot of other factors that we have access to as far as data that can tell us like our stress response without doing like salivary cortisol testing. And, so not any one brand in particular. I'm not here to like shout anyone out. I'm just saying that's a great way to be able to see, like, okay, with keto and fasting, like, when are you reaching this point where you might be able to stretch a fast a little bit longer and push it? Because I've been fasting a lot for, 9-10 years. I could jump into a 48-hour fast and it wouldn't be an issue. But if you're eating 6 meals a day and you're eating fast food and you want to jump in and do it, you're probably going to you might very well get yourself really sick doing a 48-hour fast. And it's not apples to apples. And there's also a lot of different epigenetic factors. I mean, I did a video on this that completely friggin' tanked because no one took an interest except for like 6 people on the planet.
I'm one of them, probably.
Did you see my video on like my personal epigenetics? And
no, I didn't, but I'm fascinated now.
Yeah, well, so okay, granted, I was super overweight when I was in my 20s, but when I was young, I ran my first marathon at 11 years old. And wow. I was like super crazy long distance runner, which is why I ended up overweight, because I pretty much blew my knees out by the time I was 16. Like, I was a freak. I was, like the youngest person to do the Chronicle Marathon. I was like backpacked the John Muir Trail, which was 250 miles, did that twice. And
wow.
like, I was just a freak, an endurance freak. Well,
I want to pause this interview real quick and say thank you so much for reaching this point of the interview. If you're getting any value so far, hit the thumbs up button on this video down below and check out the subscribe button here on the channel. If you're not subscribed to the Keto Camp YouTube channel as of yet, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you're notified when we go live, release a brand new video. We do that 2 to 3 times per week. I want to take a few seconds here to get to the sponsor of this episode, which is Upgraded Formulas. If you're anything like me, you probably spend quite an amount of money on supplements every single month. Wouldn't it be great if you knew you were absorbing those supplements or not absorbing those supplements? What I'm bringing you today is an exciting new opportunity to test the accuracy of the supplementation, the vitamins and the minerals, if they're actually doing what they're supposed to do. After all, you can't be a biohacker without testing, can you? In this case, I'm referring to Upgraded Formulas, upgraded hair test kit and consultation. It's very easy to do this test. It's a kit that's sent to you. You would just use hair from your body. It could be head, it could be body, it could be pubic hair. You send in your hair and then you get a consultation and you review which supplements you should be taking versus which supplements you shouldn't be taking. How well are you absorbing that? And this will be a great way to discover why you just don't feel so well. Even if you're taking all these supplements, but you still feel tired, you still have symptoms. This will give you the exact picture on what you should do next to correct that issue. I love Upgraded Formulas. I had Barton Scott on my podcast, the Keto Camp podcast before. We have an exclusive offer for you to get 10% off your hair mineral analysis kit and any of their amazing supplements, which are highly absorbed. Head to upgradedformulas.com. Use the coupon code BEN10, that is BEN10, at checkout to get 10% off today. We will also drop a link down below for you. That's upgradedformulas.com. Use the coupon code BEN10. All right, let's get back to this incredible interview.
There's a lot. I had this epiphany where I'm like, well, epigenetics, as far as like, I probably had a good degree of epigenetic like fat adaptation that occurred that made me just a super freak in terms of how I respond to keto. Now, I'm not trying to like hurt anyone's mojo by saying like, okay, well, Thomas just responds to keto because he's a super freak because he's got this like epigenetic kind of change. No, my point is like, do I respond exceptionally well to keto? Yeah. Do I respond better than even some people? Yes. Do I respond better than most? Yeah, I would say I'm a little bit of a kind of a freak with that. Like I do respond exceptionally. I can put muscle on in a second with keto when a lot of people still kind of struggle. And I'm aware of that. And I think a lot of it has to do with sort of my epigenetics and like how I've conditioned my body and that adaptation. And that adaptation that reigns through, that continues to shine. So even though, 15 years went by without doing heavy endurance work, as soon as my body saw the ketones and the fats again as a fuel source, it was like, I remember this, and I got really good at it. So there's a lot of just different variables that play in as far as like an individual. So I could argue that like I was probably a little bit adapted to going into a fast a lot quicker than someone who, has been eating just straight carbs and sedentary their entire life. Granted, I will say, full disclaimer, like if anyone's a runner, how runners typically eat. Like long distance runners don't eat well. Like, I would go run a marathon and then pound like 14 Jack in the Box tacos. It was like
they become diabetic.
Yeah, they really do. And then what happens like with me when I stopped the training, I gained 100 pounds in a little over a year. It was like ridiculous.
Wow.
So because you continue to eat like that. Slight just digression there, but point is everyone has a different hormetic curve. Heart rate variability is going to help you out a lot with that. But also just, listening to your body. If you're tired, you're tired. If you, one of the ways that you always want to kind of overcome it is don't shy away from protein. Don't be afraid of that protein. I feel like a lot of people, when they are kind of testing their body and stressing their body, it's easy for the appetite to go down. And I understand that that's a lot of the goals that people want. But the biggest mistake that I made was, skimping on the protein when I was doing a lot of aggressive fasting. I think I had a lot of like tissue tear down that I didn't get to repair properly because I was really malnourished. So there's some unsolicited advice for you.
Well, speaking of protein, what is your general recommendation for protein on keto? How much do you recommend?
Pretty simple. I'm a big fan of like 1 gram per pound of body weight. I think it's a great number, that's pretty hefty for a lot of people and a lot of people, but I don't think that everybody has to do that.
Total body weight or lean?
No, I go total. Like I'm about 180 pounds. So I mean, my goal is about 180 grams of protein a day. So,
But what if somebody weighs like 280 pounds?
yeah, and they've got, that's a good question. I think generally what they'll say is like 0.8 or 0.6 to 0.8, grams per kilogram, which ends up being significantly less. But I feel like that
Too low.
really puts us on a razor's edge with really being catabolic.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, because I'm pretty lean. I mean, I'm at probably 6-7% body fat, so it's a majority of my weight right there. So if you can factor your lean body mass, then yes, I would say if you know for a fact that you're over 10 or 15% body fat, aim more so for like 0.7, 0.8 grams per pound. I still think, I mean, protein is not going to kick you out of ketosis. I know that, 4 years ago, I did a video concerned about that. And I think I've done like 6 videos explaining different pathways and why that is not true, not the case anymore. Science, our perception of science always changes. There's always new research. And 5 years ago, yeah, we totally thought that gluconeogenesis was a bad thing. Now we know that gluconeogenesis is another driver of AMPK and puts us deeper into a ketogenic state, despite the fact that we have an insulin spike from protein, because the insulin spike is also alongside a glucagon spike that's keeping our insulin to glucagon ratio where it should be. So have as much protein as you want if it's within a respectful caloric range. And I think it's much better to lean into protein than it is to lean into fats, because you're much less likely to overdo the protein than you are to overdo the fats.
Correct. Yeah. Great share right there. I agree with you, Thomas. And in insulin, the insulin response from protein is more of a phase 2 versus a phase 1.
Yeah. Yep.
And also, not all protein is created equal. So when Thomas says protein, you're referring to animal-based protein. Is that right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, yes, I am. I'm referring to animal-based protein, but I'm also not opposed to, good quality plant-based protein. Like I do see a place for it. Like I prefer pea protein over whey protein, given how I feel with it. People have their own issues with lectins and things like that. I think that lectins, to a degree, I don't want to go down a different rabbit hole, but once again, they're a hormetic stressor. Like we have to adapt. Like, we can't sit here and bag on phytic acid and stuff too much, because if you overdo it, sure, but I think a little bit of exposure to it allows us to deal with it. So, but then, like I just don't agree with whey protein on my stomach a lot, and pea protein, like a lot of times I feel like I just need supplemental protein considering how much I lift and stuff like that. And if I were to consume a ton of whey, I feel very inflamed, but that's just me.
Yeah, I don't do well with whey protein as well. And I agree with you with I love carnivore short term. I don't think we should run away from the plant toxins because of the hormetic stress, the benefit from the hormetic stress. Just looking at the time here. So we're going to, in about 5 minutes or so, we're going to get to some of the Keto Camp Academy members. So start turning on your cameras here in the back studio, and I'll start bringing you in to ask Thomas some questions. And Becky has a question that I'll ask you in a little bit, but I want to go through a little bit of some rapid fire keto questions with you here, and feel free to answer them quickly or answer them a little bit longer.
Have I ever answered anything quickly?
You're like me, dude. You're like me. I remember you came up to me after my talk at the Biohacking Congress. And you're like, dude, what are you on?
Yeah. What are you taking? I want some.
I was fasted, dude. It's my body fat. Okay. Healthy or not on keto? Okay. First thing, cow dairy.
It's like cow dairy, C-A-L.
No, cow dairy, C-O-W.
What is cow dairy?
Cow.
It's a really tough one. But I'm going to say, if it's grass-fed, grass-finished, I think you're fine. You get enough CLA out of it that it can actually be beneficial, but there isn't tolerable upper amount. I wouldn't exceed more than 10% of your fat intake coming from dairy.
Okay. Almonds.
Sprouted, yes. Dry roasted, not quite as good, but okay. Raw, stay away.
What about almond flour? That would be raw, so stay away.
Yeah, generally, and if you can, go blanched, just because at least it's not going to have the phytic acid in the skin. So you're okay if you go blanched. I mean, it's not like one of those things where you need to, it's in everything, right? So just don't go overboard. It's the same kind of thing that you'd experience with like wheat gluten. It's like we just have this overconsumption of it. So just limit it.
I interviewed Dr. Naisha Winters a few weeks ago, and she said that almonds have a 2,000 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3 ratio.
Yeah, that's pretty intense. Yep.
That's intense. Okay, so almonds depends. Spinach and kale.
So spinach, as long as it's cooked, so the oxalates are a little bit chiller. You're still going to have some when it cooked, but once they heated, oxalates break down. Kale, go for baby kale. Kale's kind of in the same category. So baby kale is a much lower phytic and oxalic acid count.
Nightshades.
Personally, I have an allergic reaction to nightshades. So
Jeez.
if I have chili powder, I'm sneezing my ass off. So I have a little bit of my own vendetta with nightshades. But again, though, nightshades, once they're cooked, they're supposed to break down. Like I can have marinara without a problem, but if I have a raw tomato, I'm sneezing. So just kind of interesting. So I think it's highly individual. You'll probably notice it activates a histamine response very similar to what you would get with the pollen counts high. So you might notice you don't usually have an issue with nightshades unless it's like springtime. All of a sudden, you're having this like mast cell reaction that's causing this massive like bucket to overflow. So just kind of pay attention. You're like, why do I feel crappy when I eat tomatoes in spring, but not in the fall? It can absolutely be seasonal.
Interesting. Yeah. And it might be like a post-nasal drip sort of thing. Barbecued meat.
I mean, depends what kind of sauce is on it, I guess. But generally, yeah, I mean, if you go overboard all the time, like heterocyclic amines and stuff like that, if you cook it like a super high heat, I would recommend smoking meats. Just it's a little lower temperature and longer duration. So you kind of preserve things better without the, HCAs and stuff in it.
Yeah, great. And what about bacon?
I'm a fan of bacon. I don't know.
What type of bacon though?
I mean, if you're going to go for, usually the way that I look at bacon, I mean, obviously you don't want to have the processed garbage, but when you look at any strip of bacon, kind of a hack is try to find the ones that have the thick ribbon of fat versus kind of the marbling. Okay. And the reason behind that is like when you look at a piece of bacon, if it's marbled and if it doesn't have a thick kind of rim of fat on it, usually it's going to be a higher polyunsaturated, monounsaturated fat count, which is fine. It's going to be okay if it's in meat, but you don't cook bacon at a low temperature. You cook it at a high temperature, which means it denatures a lot. So you want to have a bacon that's going to be a higher saturated fat content because it can handle a high heat cooking. So you're like a backstrap, or just look at your bacon and be like, which brands are going to be like have a thick strip of saturated fat versus ones that look relatively lean, because that's usually the kind you don't want to go for.
Awesome. Any other hidden healthy, in quotes, unquotes, keto foods?
Hidden healthy ones. I have a bunch of them.
That are not really healthy, because those who are listening can't see me doing the air quotes, but not really healthy. Yeah.
I mean, again, it kind of comes down to what kind of food it is. Like, I mean, mayonnaise, you could be like, yeah, mayonnaise is a health food, but then soybean oil, right? I mean, you kind of have to look at stuff like that. So there's a lot of little idiosyncrasies that you can find in any food that's healthy or not. I'd say, some of the ones that you really have to be careful of are, salad dressings. Those are like, it's great. It's going to be a good fat content. It's usually canola oil. It's usually soybean oil, usually stuff like that. I think, again, when it comes down to like the raw almonds, the raw nuts, things like that, they're very, very difficult to break down in their raw form. And they actually chelate a lot of the other minerals that are in your gut, making it harder to get the proper mineralization. So are they unhealthy? No, but we overdo a lot of them on keto. Another thing, any kind of processed cheese, any stuff like that. Sugar, alcohols, I don't think anyone thinks they're healthy, but still need to be cognizant of them just in terms of what they do. Man, there's a million, man. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. What's worse, industrial seed oils or sugar? Very
good question. Industrial seed oils.
I agree. What's worse, industrial seed oils or smoking cigarettes?
Industrial seed oils.
I agree.
I mean, not that I'm not going to willingly go out and smoke.
Yeah, we don't promote.
I do chew nicotine gum now and then. I mean, that's an interesting science if you actually want to look at that. You probably have kind of gone down that. Like, the nicotine's not the bad part. I'm not saying like I'm addicted to nicotine gum, but in fact, who's the guy over at Biohacking Congress that was like talking about the methylene blue and everything like that, kind of the big nootropic guy.
Yeah, it's actually this Zen is there's nicotine in here. Yeah, I actually have it right here.
You don't want to overdo it, but it's interesting. People should look into the research there, because it's actually the opposite of it. Actually can be used to properly break addictions and kind of that dopamine response you get. And it's sort of the pathway that you're freeing up a lot. It gives you energy when you're fasting. And anyway, people are probably going to unsubscribe from me because they're like, Thomas, choose a nicotine gum every now and then. Do it.
No, well, there's always going to be somebody out there, but yeah, there's nicotine in here. Now it's like anything else. You don't want to take it every single day. We were talking about chaga before this. You don't want to have chaga every single day. You want to go on and off. That's the goal.
Yep.
So we have about 12 minutes or so. Let's get to some questions. I'm going to get to Tina, who is on here, and then Becky, and then Jen, and then the rest to see how much time we have. So Tina, give me a thumbs up if you're ready to come on here and ask Thomas a question. Tina, you ready? I don't think she could hear me. So I'm going to skip to Becky. Becky has a question for you that I don't think she wants to come on the camera, but the question is, what's Thomas's opinion on the optimal range for heart rate variability?
Yeah, HRV is super tough though, because again, it's one of those things that's crazy individual. So you have to find your baseline and see how you respond. For me,
what's yours?
I sit around a 90. That's like,
That's
so
pretty good.
it's pretty good, but when I first started wearing, I kind of scrapped my Aura ring because it just got in the way a lot of times with working out and stuff. I use an 8 Sleep now. Are you familiar with them?
No.
8 Sleep is it's a mattress topper that just tracks everything. It tracks my respiration rate, my heart rate variability, my deep sleep, my REM, everything just based on. So it's pretty awesome. And that has kind of, been a better indicator, kind of given me a long term because it factors in my respiration rate and other things that actually would play into that. But when I was first starting to measure, I was in the 40s. So definitely have made a concerted effort to improve it. Again, it's one of those things though. I actually feel like it's okay to go through days with a low HRV. I think it builds a little bit of resilience and it allows you to kind of get stronger, but you should be aware that, you don't overdo it on those days. So it's highly relative. Like my wife, hers is like a 120. It's amazing. I'm so jealous. And then I'm like, you know what? You're a lot more stressed out than I am. So your baseline is different,
That's just true.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because my fiance, her heart rate variability is 150, 160. And I'm like, what is going on? She's not an elite athlete or something like that. Yeah. So I want some of that. But the important thing, to Thomas's point, is find your baseline and then work on improving it. And even if you have some days where it's lower, it's not necessarily a bad thing. So I think Tina's ready to come on here. Let me bring her on here and see if her audio is working. Hey, Tina.
What's up, Tina?
Oh, your
audio's not working.
Your audio's out.
Oh dear.
There you go.
Good.
Okay, got it. Okay, good. Yep. I've got my PowerBook going at the same time, so I think I'm getting some cross communication. So can you still hear me?
Yep. Yeah, you got you.
Great. Thomas, thank you for being on here. We met at the Biohacking Conference in Santa Clara. I'm a huge fan. Love your YouTube channel. I actually flexed out of keto on Sunday night when I was playing music with some friends, had a fabulous night. I'm on a 2-day to 3-day fast right now. I went right back into ketosis the next day. I was really thrilled with that because I'm getting prepared to flex out again Memorial weekend when my family comes up and we go to Lake Tahoe for the weekend. So I'm feeling really great. My ketone levels are up. My question, since I'm fasting, and came up this morning, there's so many opinions on what breaks a fast.
Yeah.
And I know everybody gets all these questions. I have a tendency when I'm fasting, I drink a lot of LMNT to keep the minerals up, but I usually put some apple cider vinegar and lemon juice in that. And Ben this morning was talking about that probably breaks your fast. So I'd like your opinion on that and just kind of generally your philosophy about a longer term 2 to 3 day fast. What should and should you not do during that?
So there's a couple calories in apple cider vinegar. So it's, in a literal sense, it breaks a fast. In a literal sense, a little bit of lemon will break a fast. But you also have to ask yourself, two big questions. One, what is happening with apple cider vinegar? It's unique because when it converts into acetyl coenzyme A, which some would say that's triggering a metabolic response. But with how it's working at the cell and it has that conversion, it sort of mimics acetyl coenzyme A. So the body has a response as being in a net deficit as a result of consuming that apple cider vinegar. So even though there's calories in it and metabolically you're breaking a fast, you're actually putting yourself deeper into a fast as far as AMPK pathway is concerned. So apple cider vinegar will be very beneficial for you in the first 20 hours of a fast when AMPK is the main driver of everything that's happening. Because after you've been in a fast for a long period of time, AMPK is no longer the drive, matters. AMPK levels are going to stabilize because AMPK is just an energy sensor, right? So AMPK recognizes, oh, there's no food coming in, so we need to shift gears and get a different fuel source. So we need to go with fat. Well, at a certain point, once your blood lipid levels are elevated and you have free fatty acids flowing, as far as your cells are concerned, they have fuel. So AMPK no longer needs to be activated, because remember, AMPK is a sensor that recognizes that we are out of fuel, whether it's food or fatty acids that are liberated. So once the fatty acids ramp up and they're liberated, then AMPK stabilizes. AMPK says, oh, cool, we do have food, we're good. Then all of a sudden it becomes a question of PPAR alpha, gluconeogenesis, driving up that. So at that point, apple cider vinegar late in a fast is probably not going to do much good for you, but in the first 16 to 20 hours, it can do a lot for you by helping getting you there faster. The lemon juice, it's a negligible thing. And the other piece of that, real quick, is if it allows you to get through a longer fast that you ordinarily wouldn't get through, then it's a win.
So the apple cider vinegar doesn't necessarily help you later in the fast, but it doesn't hurt you either.
Correct. It's not gonna hurt you. I mean, there's always going to be people that are going to kind of bag on it, and it's
the purist.
Yeah, it's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna hurt you. It's certainly not gonna hurt you, but it's definitely going to trigger some level of metabolic response that might, turn off a small iota of autophagy, but it's so negligible. I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thanks, Tina. Awesome question. Jan, you want to come on here and ask Thomas a question? Yep. Jan's ready to go. Let's do it. Hey, Jan, just unmute yourself.
Hi, Ben. Hi, Thomas.
What's up, Jan?
Just listening to you, I've got several questions. First of all, you talked about chaga. What's chaga?
Chaga is an adaptogenic adaptogenic mushroom. So it's like in a lot of these different like Four Sigmatic and all these different kind of adaptogenic like drinks and mushroom extracts and stuff that are there. So chaga is just specifically has a lot of research surrounding the immune system. Adaptogens pretty powerful. What adaptogens do is they kind of allow the body to find homeostasis. So you can never give yourself something that's going to be like immune defense. Like, it's not how it works. Like, you can't, you're always better off to activate your body's own immune system. So what happens is, like with an adaptogenic compound, is it forces the body to adapt quickly and make changes as it needs to make to adapt to a given stressor. Chaga is just notorious in the immune system world. Like, there's lion's mane, which is notorious in like neuromuscular and just neurological in general, helping like brain connectivity and all that. So pretty interesting stuff. I've definitely noticed a big difference myself when I feel like I might be coming down with something, kind of up the chaga, and maybe it's placebo effect, but I feel like it works pretty well for me.
Okay. And you talked about nuts. Don't eat them raw.
Yeah. It's not like it's not gonna kill you. I mean, it's not, and there's certain nuts that you really want to have raw, like peely nuts once they're kind of opened up, and those are a different story. Macadamia nuts are fine to have raw because macadamia nuts don't really, they don't have any phytic acid anyway, and the omega profile is so nice on them. The reason I'm usually opposed to raw nuts is just because the phytic acid content doesn't get, that's what basically makes it very hard to break down, hard to digest, and it causes other things that are in your digestive tract at that time to become harder to digest. When you roast them, it breaks down some of that phytic acid. When you sprout them, it breaks down virtually all of it. So
is that like the soaking?
Yeah.
Them, like overnight, or okay.
Yep.
And then, you talked about nicotine gum for addiction. Could that be good for a sugar addiction?
It's a stretch to say, I'm careful not to make specific claims on it, but the same reason that nicotine gum is used to help with addiction with cigarettes is less about the nicotine, because it's not really the nicotine in tobacco that is even the addictive component. There's yes, there are addictive properties to help people feel with it, but people generally get addicted to the other compounds and the other chemicals that are much, much worse than the nicotine. So nicotine gum is used to sort of pacify and kind of get a dopamine hit in a weird way, in a way that isn't as detrimental as whatever you're trying to, get away from. So as far as sugar, yeah, and it's definitely the same pathway. So like, I chew it a lot of times when I'm fasted because I feel like I just get a huge mental surge from it, but it does also totally abolish my appetite. I mean, like I don't even want to think about food. I don't want to say it makes me nauseous thinking about food, but in a lot of ways it kind of does. Like, I just no interest whatsoever because it's sort of pacifying that same pathway.
Yeah. And this is just a general question. What got you into doing what you're doing?
Yeah. So
Where did you learn everything that you knew?
Yeah, I came out of the private equity world. I was in a ancillary lab services company that I was a part owner in. So I managed about 1,200 physicians in that. I'm not a doctor. I was 100 pounds overweight at that time. And when I went through my transformation, I had, some amazing physicians that I was overseeing in my given business with, again, ancillary lab services, providing different lab testing services to fee-for-service physicians. So I learned just a ton then when I was going through my own transformation. And then from there, it just became just a sheer passion. I was essentially in medical sales before. So understanding biochemistry was very important. And where I became really strong was in my ability to articulate the biochemistry. For lack of a better term, I had to know it in order to sell. I had to know. I was just the guy that wasn't applying it to my everyday life. And then I realized, okay, well, that is really my gift, is my ability to articulate this biochemistry. And I want to do it for a purpose other than selling medical devices. And, so then it came into, okay, once I had my transformation, I realized that I did have something to sell. I had my story, and that's how it all began. And then now I'm very blessed to have the ability to have a team of researchers and things like that can help me. Like, just whenever I find something that's interesting, we can all go at it together and just, so I try not to ever say I'm an expert. I'm just good at sharing the information in a way that gets people excited. And then I experiment on myself.
Thank you, Jan.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
Awesome question. All right, we have a couple minutes, but Thomas has to go to the next call. So if you had a question that we couldn't get to, post it in the live stream Facebook feed, and I'll go in there later and I'll answer it myself. Thomas, you're writing a new book, aren't you?
I am. Well, I've got one that just released, yeah, and then a new one that's coming out next year.
Well, the one that I'm talking about is the one, because Jill contacted me and said she's working with you. So that's the one next year?
Yep. Well, actually working with Cordo with Jill on both. So,
cool.
So yeah.
So what the new book, what is it about?
So it is like a complete guide to fasting. It's like easy, just making it simple for the everyday person.
And the new book, is that available on Amazon?
So the new book, so that's the fasting book that's coming out next year. And then the Mediterranean keto book is a cookbook, which is just geared towards, which actually would be directly applicable with your book. So if you guys wanted to get a 1-2 punch, pick up Ben's book and then pick up it's called the New Mediterranean Diet. We kind of kept keto out of the title for that reason, because Amazon was kind of weird on some of the cookbooks with keto. But anyway, the point is that it is keto. It's all Mediterranean keto. So it's great if you follow, Ben's protocol with his book with keto flexing, the meals that are in my cookbook just coincide perfectly. And then we didn't even do that on purpose. It just inadvertently kind of works. So if you pick up his book, you might want to pick out, it's called the New Mediterranean Diet. It's right now still is the top keto cookbook bestseller on Amazon.
Awesome. That's terrific, Thomas. Yeah, go get his book. We'll put a link for it in the live stream and the podcast notes. Thomas, thank you for being a wealth of information, an amazing human being. Let me know the next time you come down to Miami. Can't wait to hang out with you and just keep shining bright in a world that needs your work. So I want to say thank you. We all appreciate you. And I look forward to doing a round 3 with you, hopefully sometime soon.
Likewise, my man.
All right. Take care, brother. Bye.
See you guys. Bye.